Listen to what Isaiah is saying to us as we try to direct God. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Hunter and Guy, thank you for coming.
All right, Guy, come on up. I was going to say some opening words, and then I sort of worked them into the children's story. So this morning, we have Guy Burkholder, who's coming up to share a part of his amazing story with us. The one thought that I would say is, as I shared with the kids, we all have a story. Now, you're going to hear a pretty amazing story this morning. That should never devalue our stories. Each and every one of us has an amazing story that shared with others connects and draws us closer to God. And even sometimes just sharing those stories is an important part of our process. So, Guy, thank you for coming to share with us this morning. I'm going to sit down so we maybe feel a little bit more comfortable. Who knows?
There we go.
Maybe.
It's a way to make fun of my short legs here.
That was not the intention, but anything that makes people laugh, we feel good about. Stories are always better when we're laughing. So, Guy, not everyone in this building knows you or knows who you are. No, my feet don't touch.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Not everyone in our congregation is fully aware of who you are, so I might just encourage you to give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. So, very briefly, my name's Guy Burkholder, and despite the last name and the fact that I'm from Lancaster, I didn't grow up in a Mennonite family. I did grow up in a family that valued going to church. We were always very involved at Redeemer Lutheran on Pearl Street, and I had the luck of growing up in a very loving, good family. I'm also a McCaskey graduate. I graduated in '96, and met my wife when I was 16, so we met young, and probably fell in love pretty early, and dated for the most part through high school, and then graduated. And I know that a lot of my friends and family wondered what I was doing when I left some exciting opportunities that I had at the University of Pittsburgh to come back and chase Emily down to a small Mennonite school in Virginia, which I humbly admit that's exactly what I did. But even at a young age, I was smart enough to know when I kind of won the lottery, and my goal was to spend life with her, and I got lucky enough to achieve that. So we went to school there, graduated, and moved to Philadelphia, where Emily practiced nursing, and I was working as a social worker, engaging chronically homeless adults that were either living on the streets or in shelters, and spent about 7 years doing that. Came to a point where I sort of realized that being a social worker, we started having kids, and I realized that, I admit this humbly, and I'm not necessarily always overly proud of it, but I think that to give my kids the kind of opportunities that I wanted to be able to give them, I wasn't going to be able to get paid enough as a social worker to give them those kind of opportunities. So I went back to school for construction management and been doing that since. And as I said, we had 5 children. Initially I had 2 kids, then moved from Philadelphia to Lancaster a number of years ago. And then 3 years ago, we were all surprised by the news that we were going to be welcoming a set of triplets into the family. And that was, if I'm honest, it was a scary proposition to say the least when we first heard about it. And but fast forward to now, it's been a huge blessing. Emily and I like to joke that if our biggest problem in life is too many people to love, that's probably a pretty good problem to have. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Yeah. So life was kind of rolling along. You had your children, and something sort of remarkable happened to you. Remarkable, life-changing, tragic? All those things? Traumatic?
Traumatic, absolutely.
Traumatic.
Yeah. Life-changing for sure.
Tell me what happened.
So what's funny, I guess I'll back up. My very last memory of what I kind of refer to as my old life was spending a fun day doing a Girls on the Run event with my oldest daughter, Anna, and followed by a soccer game that Ellie was taking part in, and it was a really good day, and that was very close to being my very last memory on Earth. From what I'm told, the next day I packed up and left to go on a business trip that I had scheduled out to San Francisco, and for whatever reason I never went on that flight, and I've gotten varying responses as to what had happened. I've heard in some cases that I boarded the plane and abruptly left. I've also heard that I never boarded the plane. Whatever happened, I'll probably never know. It appears I headed back from the airport back to Lancaster and was on the turnpike and must have fallen asleep. Based on accounts from drivers that called in to 911, I must have fallen asleep. I went at probably going about 80 miles an hour. I sort of veered to the side of the road and ran into a parked construction vehicle, and I'm very glad to say that it was after hours on a Sunday evening, so no one else was involved. So nobody else, thankfully, was injured. But it was a significant crash. I had the opportunity to meet some of the first responders a number of months later, and some of the feedback I got from them was that my vehicle had pushed the construction truck about 135 feet, and my vehicle was completely demolished. And the first responders kind of joked with each other that they both had held off on completing their paperwork for a couple of days because they were both just simply waiting for final confirmation that I had died. Luckily, that didn't happen. But
So you were whisked away to the Reading Hospital, and you started out in a coma, correct?
correct, yeah. So I was taken to the Reading Hospital, and I was in a coma for about 8 days. And there were some scary moments through that. Obviously, I don't have memory of those, but my wife sure does, as does my family. There were complications such as having some blood clots, while at the same time massive brain bleed, which for those that know, they're treated completely opposite. So you kind of choose which to address. So those moments were obviously scary. I eventually came out of my coma and stayed at the Reading Hospital for another week or so, and I was taken to Lancaster Rehab Hospital, where I was inpatient for another 7 weeks or so, something like that.
So during the accident, you experienced a traumatic brain injury, and you're going to tell me what it's called again?
Sure, yeah. So it's the technical term of what exactly I had received was it was called a severe diffuse axonal injury, and the prognosis for something like that is horrendous at best. I guess eventually I did learn about some of the details of that injury. As I'll kind of comment a little later, I feel like I was motivated not to read about the realities of that, because that was only going to cause limitation to me.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, you said that 90% of the people that have, what do you call it again? The axonal
severe diffuse axonal injury, yeah.
Severe diffuse axonal injury. 90% of the people that have that injury do not live, correct?
Right.
Of the 10% that do live, 90% are in a vegetative state, never to recover.
Correct.
So 1 out of 100 people that experience this injury sort of have the opportunity to sit in front of their church and share their story.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, maybe you can fill in some of the blanks for me, but you're saying what happens is that it's a severe sort of shaking of the brain that breaks off the sort of connections from the brain to the body. So you lost a lot of function.
Correct, yeah. So that injury is most commonly associated with things like bomb blast, bad car accidents, and shaken baby syndrome. Essentially what happens is your brain is shaking around in your head so violently that there's not really a single pinpoint as to where your brain was damaged. It's a separation of connections all throughout your brain. Is essentially what that defines.
So you had to relearn walking,
Pretty much everything, yeah.
eating, talking. What did that feel like?
Well, it was certainly difficult, to say the least. I mean, absolutely everything. Emily and I joke that in the last 2 years, I've sort of moved through every single phase of life again, all the way from being an infant. Because like you say, I had to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to eat. I had to relearn words. I had to learn how to write. Virtually everything I had to relearn. And it's funny, I have kind of a funny spin on that. All that stuff was certainly extremely hard, by all means. But at the same time, I see it as a bit of a blessing as well, because in the process of relearning all these things, it put me in a position to have appreciation for those things that we so often take for granted. So in a funny way, I almost see that as a gift as much as anything.
So all of the things that we take for granted, like kicking our legs or moving our arms or going for a run, are things that we take for granted. And it's been a long journey, correct? So if I remember, it was part of one of the story that you told me was that, even throughout the process, there were times where you started getting a little cocky about things. You want to tell us the story from your run at Universal?
Sure, yeah. So that's a good story. I mean, plenty of stories like this, but progression took time, and I took it one step at a time, so to speak. At one point, for a while, I was for a number of months after I got out of the hospital and came home. A number of months later, I started going to Universal Gym, try to get back to physical health again, stuff like that. And for a while, I was jogging in the swimming pool because I needed the support so I wasn't falling over and things like that. Eventually, I was able to move out of the pool, and I started taking short jogs around the indoor track that they have. And one day while I was doing that, I did a few laps. And what my jogs at that time looked like, and still to this day, to a moderate degree, it's like this to an extent. One thing that I lost function of to a good degree is my whole right side was not necessarily connected to my brain in a way that it responded to direction that my brain thought it was giving. So fast forward to the run I'm taking. I'm jogging around the track, and what I'm doing is I'm running, and each time it comes to my right leg, I remind myself, lift your leg, lift your leg, lift your leg. And in some ways it almost was kind of fun because it became a game and something to overcome. So I was able to see it as a challenge to win. But after I did that for a little while, I was becoming overly confident and lost track of what I was doing. And sure enough, I didn't tell myself to lift my leg, and I didn't. And I fell, face first onto the track. And people, I'm sure it was hilarious and concerning at the same time. People, came over to ask if I was okay, and I was frustrated, so I just looked up. I'm fine, get out of the way, and I went back up and lift your leg, try to get back to running. I'm sure it was hilarious looking, but
the whole thing must have been pretty humbling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you experienced God pretty deeply through that process, kind of like being a child again.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the thing I keep coming back to is that God was very much present with me while I was going through these challenges, and some of the stuff that I talk about at times sounds very corny and almost contrived, but there's not a doubt in my mind He was right there with me as I was going through these things, and one example of that would be that getting back to talking about the details of my prognosis. One day I'm sitting there reading through as many documents as I could find, calling out what to expect when you have an injury like mine, and at that point I was far from recovered to the degree that I am right now. and I'm reading it, I'm becoming extremely angry and sad and frustrated. And as corny as this is going to sound, as silly as it's going to sound and contrived, I couldn't, be more adamant about this. I felt like I was taken while I'm sitting there reading this and feeling very down. I literally felt like there were hands placed on my head and brought up away from looking at the book. And at that point, I had gotten what I consider some firm messages from God, and what I felt like I was told was stop. I really didn't hear a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot of words, but I was told stop. Just trust me. And nothing more than that. And I felt compelled to do just that. So I put the books aside and trusted that my outcome was going to be as God saw fit.
And part of that is what drew you to Isaiah 55:8-9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I should break this up right now and just kind of refocus. One thing I think that I want to make use of this discussion for is I absolutely hope that people can see my outcome as a sign of hope, and anytime you're going through a challenge, to be able to see that there is hope that there could be outcomes other than what's likely. But really, that's almost an aside. I think the key that I want to make sure I'm pointing out today is that what I felt like I really got from God was I wouldn't have gotten to where I am right now if I hadn't gotten to a point of acceptance with Him long ago when I was far from recovered to this degree. I did not know what my recovery was going to look like. I didn't know what I was going to be getting back to. And I get to a point where I said, you know what, God, I trust that you have a plan. I trust your plan. It's obvious I really am in control of very little. I've been taught about you all my life, and if I really believe what I've been taught, which I do, then I'm just simply going to have to trust you. And that's really what I want to get back to. So there's always going to be really hard, difficult things that happen in our lives. I think what I want to point out is a reminder that God's walking through us with that. It's not a matter of Him, is He present with someone across the world right now? He's a part of us, He's with us. And I think that what He's asking us to do is just that. Simply trust that, He knows what we're going through. He knows what, the joys, the sorrows, the hardships, the exciting times, and He's right there with us on it. All He's asking us to do is let go of control, our desire for control, and just trust in His plan for us.
So, Guy, you're a pretty positive guy. You're a pretty positive guy, pretty positive man. Just happen to be named Guy. Did you ever go through times or parts of this where you kind of just felt like, why me, or
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can almost spin that question in a certain way. Yes, I think that absolutely. There were certainly times that I would say the very hardest part of my experience was seeing the impact it was having on people that I loved, namely my wife, my parents, my kids. There was never a time that I wasn't glad and appreciative, despite my limitations, that I remained on this earth. But there are certainly times when I expressed to God, hey, God, why? Why'd you keep me around? It's, look at what you're doing to my wife. I mean, she already was put in a position to have to care for 3 additional children, along with what we do have. She has her career. Why are you holding her back with me? I'm now creating. Not only am I not helping, I'm creating even more work for her. What are you thinking? Why didn't you just take me? So again, that kind of played into my time with God, and having to accept the fact that God coming back and saying, look, you don't know what the plan is. I can't tell you any more than that, essentially, but just trust me.
And prayer was a big part of the process, correct?
Absolutely. So one of the things that Emily held on to a lot, and I certainly feel like I felt to a great degree, is, and I'll almost digress yet again, and kind of point out that we so often get messages in the news and otherwise about all the negative things happening in the world, and there certainly are. I don't want to turn a blind eye to that. There are a lot of people experiencing very hard things around the world, but there's also so much good that people are doing all the time. And we were a direct beneficiary of that, and became very aware of that. Part of which was, not only people coming and physically helping us with things, but just as much as that, feeling a sense of prayer. And I know that was something that Emily shared that she held on to tightly during some of the hardest times. That she was aware of the fact there were just so many people praying for us. Here, people we hadn't heard it from for years and years that were aware of what was going on and prayed for us, and I mean all the way over to and this may bring up a topic of another conversation that you don't want to touch right now, but there was even a Muslim family that we got to know through a marriage in Pakistan. They were praying for us as well, and as along with everything else, it was felt, and I'd probably digress to a point that I'm getting away from your topic, aren't I?
No, you're talking about prayer. Then there was a friend of yours that came up from Virginia?
Yeah, so this again was something that Emily held on to very tightly during the process. So one of my good friends from college, a guy that I shared a house with for a couple of years, just a good guy, we had a lot of really good experiences, went to East Africa together, stuff like that. He obviously got news of my accident and was praying, and he felt a calling from God that he was told to come up and anoint me with oil. And he's based in Chesapeake, Virginia, and has a very busy life. He has a family of I think it's three children and a wife, and he also has his own business, and he's heads youth ministries at his church down there. And with that beat, he stopped what he was doing. He called Emily to make sure that she was okay with him coming by. And he drove the 7 hours from Chesapeake, Virginia, up to Reading, where I was, and did just that. Was present with me, put oils on me, and said some prayers, and stuck around, I think, for about a half an hour or so, and then hit the road. And he said that he felt as he was pulling away, God came to him and said, despite everything you're hearing about the likely prognosis, stuff like that, just trust, he's going to come back to full health. You're not going to understand why or when, but that's what's going to happen. And he shared that with Emily. I mean, he felt firmly enough in that message that he was receiving from God that he shared that he was willing to step out and share that with Emily, and she held on to that very tightly as well.
That's powerful. The power of prayer. And so today, you sit here, and you are also someone that has participated in a sort of support group for traumatic brain injury, but now you're leading the support group for traumatic brain injury. What do you tell someone who is maybe just at the beginning of the process of healing? What are your words of wisdom? What do you try to pass on to them?
Sure. Well, so first of all, I want to point out the fact that I was a beneficiary of that group myself. I think that one thing that is probably very hard to describe to anyone that hasn't gone through a severe brain injury is that you're simply a different person. I know that I've returned in a very healthy way and probably come across seeming very similar to most of my friends, and I think my family sees the difference in me to some degree, but I'm a very different person than I used to be, and I get to a point, and this seems to be a common topic in our support groups, that we really can't again move through life until we get to a point where we can say goodbye to our old selves and welcome in who we now are. And so that's a common topic that we discuss, things like that. I try my best, since I was asked to kind of help take a leadership role in things, I try my best to try to place a positive focus on things, because I think that it's become very obvious to me that we're in control of so little in life. I mean, we want to believe that we're in control of things, and even now I try to grasp control of things, and I'm back to that flaw again. But But ultimately, really, we're given the luxury of truly having control of so little. But the one thing we really do have control of, and God grants us this as well, is how we choose to look at something. So I think that, again, we're bound to have hardships in life and things that are sad and undesirable and stuff like that. But how we choose to focus on that that's one of the very few true things we have absolute control over. So I try to do what I can to take the topics of discussion, often which are based on really hard challenges that we're going through as survivors, and those supporting us as well, and try to put a spin on that in terms of what could be a potential growth or positive experience that could come from this.
Yeah.
I could probably elaborate and go into that, but I won't.
Well, I mean, that sort of leads into a little bit, I guess, of what I'm calling just sort of parting thoughts or parting shots. And one of the things I've heard you say kind of over and over again as we've talked is that hard does not equal bad. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So it's funny that feels like a kind of almost a personal slogan I've been living life by for a while. Is that there are a lot of hard things that we're all bound to come across. I mean, life has hardships in them. We're obviously lucky to live in an environment that the hardships are minimized. We weren't born into war-torn countries and bound with poverty, great poverty and stuff like that. But we all have hardships nonetheless. But again, getting back to the one freedom we do have, which is choosing how to look at something. Things that are hard, the one choice we have is we don't have to see a hardship as equaling bad. Oftentimes hardships can have good things come out of them, and we have the choice to view things that way.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things I said that I've heard you say is that the more control you feel, the less you feel God's presence.
Yeah, well, it's funny, you're smiling at me here when I made the one comment, and it's ironic and sad at the same time, which is, I felt God's presence in such a strong way when I was at the very lowest points of my recovery. Hearing His voice, hearing Him, feeling Him directly with me. And ironically, it's my desire as the flawed human being that I am. It's my desire to get back to grasping control of everything that I can. And every time, the more I try to grasp control of myself, the less ultimately, I'm saying that I'm trusting Him to take care of life's details, right? And so again, it's a very funny dichotomy where it's almost sad that right there, I'm very present with my Maker, but I'm now, the more He gives back to me, the more I'm pushing Him away and trying to grab control for myself. So the only thing I really feel like I can do is apologize for doing that. Try not to. I know I do. I just regularly have to ask for forgiveness for that because
Yeah, so I guess even just finally with that sense of God's presence in the brokenness or in the hardships and the challenges and the struggles, I have also heard you say that you're thinking in the grand scheme of things, if you had it all to do over again, you might not change anything. Is that true?
Well, it's funny. I would actually say that very strongly. As funny as it's going to sound, if an angel came to you today and said, hey, I can take you back to before your accident and make none of this happen for you or your family, I think that what we've gotten out of this experience, specifically the kind of insight we've gotten from God Himself, I almost view now as more of a gift than a hardship. And getting back to kind of what you were asking about, have you ever asked about why me? That returns me to kind of the spin I was talking about that I had on that, which is I do ask why me, but the way I ask that is quite the opposite. It's why me? Why did you grant me with this gift? And That's not to say that God doesn't put himself in a position to grant everybody with equal insight and presence in their lives. I think he's always right there in front of us to see and be present with. I just had the unique opportunity to be placed at such a low point that I was forced to recognize what was in front of me.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this journey. Now, with that last thought, let's just throw this out there before we're done. Guys, not encouraging any of us to drive our cars into trees, hoping for hardship. Hardship comes and finds us. But the message is, how are we finding God in the midst of that? And it has been a privilege and an honor for me to hear your story, to share with this, and to share it with the congregation. I think I will just close with just a prayer. Is that okay?
Please do.
Yeah, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I praise you for Guy. I praise you for his willingness to share his story with us. Lord, may it give strength to those that are going through particular challenges today. May it be something that gives us a base and a foundation to think about when we face our challenges. May it be a call to trust you and an invitation to hand over control. Lord, I thank you for your stories and the ways that you are present in our lives. Lead us and guide us today in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.